Tell me about a bit about Visual Unity, the company itself, and what your current role is here.
Sure. So at the moment, what we do in Visual Unity is we build basically digital video streaming applications and infrastructure. So for the Czech market, for example, we did the Czech television e-vysílání application and infrastructure. And we've also done, for example, Top Fun, Tip Sport, Nova Vojo, and several others for the local market. So basically any broadcaster or aggregators of content could be companies that buy content from Hollywood or from the BBC in the UK, and they want to sell that in the local market through internet streaming. Then we provide that infrastructure. We call that over-the-top platforms, OTT platforms. And so we're an OTT provider building these type of platforms, and we then deliver those streaming video services onto multiple screens. Could be a tablet, could be a mobile phone, could be a computer, or it could be the classic television.
Okay.
So coming back to your question,
Sure.
so my role is I'm running marketing, and I also run strategy for the company. So anything to deal with international expansion of the company, the web presence, how we partner strategically with companies, whether it's on the product side or on a channel side. I'm involved in that and work very closely with the sales department.
Okay, excellent. So let me actually jump into that question. How closely do you guys work with the sales department, and what type of communication must you have to kind of understand what's happening within week to week?
Right. So that's a good question. So the way we have structured it is that we're really close. I mean, we're as close as where you are sitting to me. So in other words, the head of sales sits right across from me in the office, and we collaborate on a daily basis on several different initiatives, making sure that we're aligned. And I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've been doing business for 20 years, and I believe that the marketing department needs to sit together with the sales department side by side. You have a lot of companies that kind of have siloed approaches to marketing, where
Sure.
they have a separate department, marketing manager sits across in a different building or a different area of the same building, but not integrated with the sales team. So I really wanted to make sure that we're working very closely together, and partially how that's worked out is that the head of sales basically hired me into this role. So that's kind of helped out that type of collaboration.
What would you say would be some of the negative aspects, as you said, with other companies who don't have this direct connection between the two?
Well, that is really
Upcoming problems.
Yeah,
perhaps.
that's kind of comes to a really to my heart, that type of question, because when you have a company that has a siloed approach to marketing and sales, or it could be a siloed approach to technical product development and sales and marketing.
Sure.
Or it could be a siloed approach on a geographic level, the Americans versus the Europeans, for example. And when you have this siloed approach, you have very much this us and them type dilemma, where
separation.
Yeah, separation issues. You when you work it within your world, you don't want the other world to step onto your toes, so to speak. And that siloed approach doesn't really work in the long term, because once you have company employees stepping on each other's toes, or viewed that way, then you have these political struggles between the departments. But the reality is that a lot of employees need to step on each other's toes, or that's the negative way of looking at it. The positive way of looking at it is when you're collaborating, you're stepping on each other's toes, for example, but in fact you're just collaborating.
Yeah.
So what I try to avoid is this us and them scenario, where you're doing something and you're saying, okay, well, sales is doing their thing. As long as they don't bug me or affect my world, then everything's okay. But as soon as they start affecting my world, then we kind of have this world struggle, and you're stepping on my toes. But if you're in an environment where you're working together, then you don't have that type of mentality where people feel like they're intruding on each other's business. It's ingrained in the culture to work together.
Sure.
And so I try to facilitate this one world approach. And that has to be done at a management level. Managers facilitate how the rest of the employees operate. So if the managers have this world mentality, then everybody underneath them will have the same type of mentality. But if the manager says, we are working as one team, then there's a bigger likelihood that the rest of the employees will have that type of approach as well.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask you, since you had a lot of experience in sales and marketing, what would you say kind of like insights it gives you, or a better advantage that you have experience in both to be better? So for example, if you have a lot of experience in sales and then you went into marketing, or vice versa, what types of things can you learn from one to transfer to the other? Right.
So there's different ways to approach that, Mike. And the way I would kind of look at it is, marketing can see things on a bigger scale. Okay. As a marketing person and head of strategy, I read a lot of analyst reports. I read ComScore. I read Informa, Gartner. These are leading analysts on a global scale that talk about the industry and who are the movers and shakers and how the industry is moving. So that top level or 10,000 meter view is very important in this industry, to see how things are shaking out and how things are moving in the industry. But then salespeople kind of have this feet on the street approach, and they see it from the perspective of individual deals, individual client requirements, individual projects, and that is their perspective. And what we're looking for is to bring the two together. So the top level view of marketing merges in with the ground up view of sales, and that type of perspective is important. So if somebody has a marketing background moving into sales, then they can translate that 10,000 meter view to the feet on the street. And then the person that's in sales gets the respect of people in marketing if they move into marketing, because they have the feet on the street view. And they've been there. And so it really comes down to the respect of your colleagues. I started out with 10 years in marketing, and then I decided to move into sales and get 10 years of experience in sales. Because one of the things I learned is that the top managers in an organization, the CEOs and general managers, come generally from a sales or a marketing background. Usually from a sales background is kind of the leading force, but a combination of the two really helps out. So with 10 years of marketing and putting another 10 years behind me in sales, I could move into the sales department and bring my marketing experience, but then I can talk to the marketing people and say, I've been in your shoes for 10 years.
Sure.
I know where you're coming from. I know how hard you work. So I could get their participation in helping out when I was in my sales role. Because they respected me coming from a marketing background.
Sure.
And vice versa. With experience in sales, even as a marketeer, I now back in marketing, I can talk to the sales guy and say, you can tell me how things work, but you're preaching to the choir, because I've been there for 10 years. So I know, and I ran a pipeline, and I ran projects, and I ran P&L and profit and loss and so on. So I see where you guys are coming from as well.
Talking a bit about expanding internationally, as you said before, what types of things are needed to put into place to advance a company's portfolio and get more of a global presence?
Right. So having
specifically for visual, what you're doing at the moment.
for Visual Unity, okay. So what we're doing is we are opening up into key markets, and the strategy that we're looking at is like a seed approach, and the seed approach is that you plant a seed, and the seed then grows into a bigger department and a bigger presence in that market.
Sure.
And that seed kind of comes into different flavors, so to speak. One seed is you hire a very key, competent individual that knows the region, is from the region, and is a salesperson that can build out that region, and typically would have a lot of experience in the industry that we're in. So that's a seed from an employment perspective. The second seed is in a project, getting a seed or a lighthouse project where we have a key client that we sign up in that region that will help us to build out a client base. But to get one lighthouse account that can help us build that out is important. And then a third seed in some regions is a key partnership. So the salesperson can work beside a key system integrator or a telco or that type of partner that fits within our industry, a broadcast service provider, system integrator that has the experience in the region and can help us build out that region as well from a channel perspective. So these are kind of the seed approach, and that helps us to build out a presence. We open an office in Los Angeles this year, which is big for us, and then we also open up an office in Munich, and we're going to expand really from there in expanding our London presence and our presence in Nairobi in Africa and in other regions.
So you need guys from these areas who know these places and the culture and everything to kind of get you started from the ground up. So.
Yeah. You need somebody that knows the language, speaks the language, is native to that country, that has decades or a decade of experience in this industry, can navigate within high levels of contact, very high level people within an organization, C-level people, chief executive officer, chief technology officer, chief sales officer, to talk to those level of people, and that's the type of people that we would be looking for.
Okay.
Key things in terms of web presence. One thing I think that's important in terms of web presence is your web needs to really hone in quite quickly on what you do. That's things that we're working on as well, so that when people come to your site that don't know what OTT is, that don't know what digital video is about, and even if they do know about these things, they know what role you play within that ecosystem.
Very well defined and easy to
very well defined. Because digital video could mean ingesting video into an infrastructure. It could be about managing video. It could be about creating video. It could be about delivering it through a content delivery network. It could be about multi-screen just at the end of that chain, supply chain as we would call it. And it could be somebody that just sells cameras, right? So the ecosystem can be quite large, and you need to hone in on explaining to people what you do, whether it's through video, whether it's through documents, whether it's through a combination of some interactive capabilities, case studies. That's really key in terms of an online presence, is to have clients talk about you and endorse what you do as a solution provider. And one of the latest things that we're working on is, for example, responsive design. Responsive design is where when you're looking at the website on a tablet or a computer or a mobile, the responsive design will be responsive to that form factor that you're actually looking at.
Okay. Sure.
And that is kind of the latest trend right now, is to make sure that websites are responsive to the whatever you're using.
Okay. Which type of marketing would you say takes the most planning? Is the most difficult, and perhaps which ones generate the best leads?
Well, you kind of answered my question, because the most difficult, in my view, in marketing is lead generation.
Okay, sure.
Because lead generation is very much about getting the right database, getting a campaign together that will be targeting that database, determining the communication path to use that campaign. Maybe the communication path is a banner ad, a banner ad, or an online advertisement, or it could be a direct email campaign. It could be a physical email post campaign. It could be a sponsorship package that promotes that campaign. So to find the right cost-effective approach to how to deliver that is important. And then once you start to generate those leads, there's the aspect of qualifying those leads and turning them into sale. Yeah. So how you utilize telemarketeers to qualify, how you use telesales to help close deals, and then how telesales would work with direct sales in order to take on a more physical one-to-one approach to closing those deals. So this is like a really long approach from the database to actually making it a sale, that in any one of those junctures you have a critical failure point. And anytime you're transferring from one person to another, or from one system to another information, then you have a critical failure point. So marketing, taking these leads and giving them to sales, that's a classic failure point. Because those salespeople may not look at those leads, they might not respect the approach to how much effort was put into creating those leads, and they could potentially just disregard them altogether. Months of effort and cost, because they don't see the value in that lead that's in front of them. So this handover process is critical to making sure that such a campaign, a lead generation campaign, is successful.
Okay, and again, like we talked about before, that lack of communication between sales and marketing, that could, again, this is where that takes place.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So we need to have buy-in from all the departments as we build out these campaigns in advance, and not only and the people that will actually do the work, so that when they start to receive this information, they're going to act on it quickly and efficiently, because there's an exponential decay in value of a lead. So one example is that every 2 to 3 days there's a 50% drop off in success to an online lead. Yeah. So if you leave something 3 weeks to actually follow up on that lead, it's already dead.
Worthless.
Yeah. So these time windows are important, and that's why it's important to kind of streamline these processes.
How do you learn about consumer trends, and in this specific industry, how often are things changing? How do you keep up with the times?
That's a good question, because when I jumped into this industry, navigating through the amount of information is somewhat challenging. And even when you have exhausted the information that you think is all the information that you found, in typical fact, it's actually just an island of information that based on your methodology took you to that island. But there's other islands that you completely missed out because you haven't taken a different approach.
Sure.
So being really good at Google is important. Trying to think out of the box because a Google search is directly proportional to how good you can actually put in keywords in order to search for information. What I do often is that when I'm looking for specific information, I'll Google something, I'll look at the documents, but then I'll go to the images.
Okay.
And I'll look at the images and see what type of images relate to my Google search as well, and then that will lead me back to a web page as well. Okay. From that image. So that helps me a lot visually to be able to find information, like, for example, how many internet users there are in the world. That could be a Google search, and then going to the images, you can find graphs that people have already done. So I think another critical thing is that you kind of have to have some passion in it as well. It's not just about putting in a search Boolean stream of a string of words and hoping for the best and because if you don't have the passion, if that search doesn't lead to anything, you're just going to give up. But sometimes it may take me 4 hours to find information so that I can put together one graph.
Yeah.
And other times it'll take me 5 minutes. So if you don't have the passion, you kind of give up too fast, and you don't spend the time to read what's available. And then from what you're reading, it kind of gives you more ideas on how to search for other things. And then you realize that there's a whole bunch of other islands out there that give you more information. So
it's almost like don't just take one straight approach. You have to be open to all the different options and different paths.
And I'm constantly looking between the images and the documents and going back and forth and spending hours in some cases doing research. Most of what I need, let's say 95% of what I need, is free, is already available.
Sure.
There is value, and I in my previous companies we would spend $150,000 a year on Gartner research reports, and I would read them religiously and learn about the market, and those were always good reports. Usually those type of reports are really, and those type of analysts are really at the leading edge, the bleeding edge of where the industry is, and you're paying for that bleeding edge. Eventually journalists catch on to what analysts are talking about, but 6 months later, for example. So the timeliness of information is important, and if you really need to find out what's on the bleeding edge, then you're going to be paying for a $6,000 report. But if the timeliness is not that important, then you can wait 6 months or a year, and sometimes these reports become available, but then the next report you have to pay for. So, but in most cases, 95% of the time, I can find things for free from what I'm looking for.
Sure, it's available out there. No. Can you tell me about or describe a successful marketing campaign that you've done at some point throughout your career?
Successful marketing campaigns. So we used to run a lot of campaigns in when I was in VeriSign. VeriSign was an internet security company, and we had basically a well-oiled machine in terms of how to drive marketing. VeriSign was a purely an internet company. All of their marketing was using the internet, and even years in some cases before other companies were using the internet for marketing, and it was 100% using the internet for marketing. Nothing in the post, for example, in comparing the two. So this whole lead generation approach was well oiled in terms of knowing the databases that were effective, measuring against them once the campaign was completed, utilizing different sources of databases, and even challenging these database owners, saying, this other competitor was better than you, were going to use their database. You can't use really a database more than once every 6 months, for example, before you recycle it. So we could negotiate rates because of the competition between the databases, but this allowed us to be effective, mainly because we were measuring the success of these campaigns, and it's called closed loop marketing. So you start off from the campaign, you run the campaign, and then at the end you're measuring the campaign so that you can be more effective the next time you do it. If you can't measure it, then you have an issue in terms of how effective you have become. That measurement would be, let's say, in the amount of leads that were generated from a marketing perspective, but really sales cared about how much revenue was generated from that campaign. And things have evolved quite a bit, but we found a lot of success in sponsorships and ad banners to newsletters, for example, in the security industry, that were promoting the VeriSign brand and having a click through that banner to our website, where they would fill out a landing page, capture the details so that we can call them through a telesales initiative.
Okay.
Yeah. So branding, I think, is important, and I think a lot of that comes down to the foundation of culture within a company. The culture of the management team and the employees of that team basically strengthen that brand to what it becomes. Marketing puts the brand out there so that consumers and subscribers can learn about what you're doing as a company, but it's the employees and the culture that enforces it. So anytime we're talking to the press, anytime we're talking to analysts, anytime we're talking to clients, and even when we're talking to competitors, we have a face and an image that continually supports that brand. So I think that's important as a foundation, and it's also a realization that you can build a brand for years, but you can also destroy it within minutes.
Sure.
Right? There can be some things that happen that are unforeseeable, that happen in the market, that there are forces beyond your control, or even forces that were within your control that can crumble the brand. So the stronger brand and management team that you have, the more you can navigate around the difficult times to maintain that image while these type of crises are happening.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Last question. Can you give some advice for students who'd like to jump into a career either in marketing and in sales, or just if you want to answer it as together?
Advice for students. I think that the best advice that I would give is that, and I can only look at it from my experience.
Sure.
The best advice I would give is try to get into a good company that has a good reputation, a good brand, a good management team, but don't care where you start. Okay? If you want to be in marketing, then try to get into the marketing department, but don't worry about where you're placed in that marketing department, because managers see potential. And even if you start out with no salary, I mean, it may sound ridiculous, but some people that want to be in certain companies would go there without a salary for months to prove themselves and to gain experience. And the only way you're going to do that is to put your ego aside and realize you don't have any experience yet, and you need to start from some basis. I mean, realistically, most of us don't have to worry about that, but there are some in Western companies that will come into that market with no experience and will start completely at the bottom. And if they're good, then they'll rise up through the chain. People leave the company. People see your potential in you, and you can rise up through the ranks. And soon enough, you realize you actually forget where you started from. There's some jobs, for example, and say they started with 100% commission. Mm-hmm. So you're probably aware of that, right?
Sure.
That's another good example. You have no salary. The only way you're going to make money is if you sell something.
If you're good.
And if you're good, yeah. And I find that people that started out in telesales, for example, or telemarketing, and that had to make 120 phone calls on a daily basis, and they did that for a year and a half, those are the best salespeople. Because they understand people, they understand how to talk to people, they understand how to navigate through discussions. And then when they're having a face-to-face discussion in a sales capacity 5 years down the road, it's easy for them because they did it. They went through the grind during those tough 100% commission days,
Sure.
and that's the foundation from which they built their sales experience. And for those that get past that, become great managers and great salespeople and great marketing people as well.
It's like building tough skin.
Yeah, you're building a tough skin, and everything comes down to something I haven't said yet, which is you need to realize that if you were going to be really good at where you want to go, you're probably going to be working really hard, like a dog, for the first 10 years of your career. In my first 10 years, and I'm only talking from experience,
Yeah.
in my first 10 years, I was working 60 to 80 hours a week. And for the first, I would say 6 years of that,
Yeah.
people noticed, but I didn't feel like anybody noticed. I was working weekends, I was working nights. I sometimes would be in the office till 2 o'clock in the morning to get something done because we had a tender that had to be sent out the next day, and we couldn't miss the deadline, and we spent 3 months on it. And all you need to do is send that tender in 1 hour late, and that 3 months of effort and 20 people who worked on it all goes out the door. So I think that this kind of work ethic that you establish at the beginning kind of creates who you are as a person, and eventually you get to a point where you may not be working 68 hours a week after those 10 years, but that foundation that you created has already established your reputation and established your work ethic and so on. So for example, in my case, when I was here in Prague from 93 to 99, that 5 years that I put in got me promoted to run marketing for Europe, Middle East, Africa in Motorola in London. I didn't move to London for that. And so I guess the final thing I would say there is you need to identify opportunities when they come to you. You need to be a lot of people that I find have not been successful in their life. Typically, they discount opportunities that other people see as an opportunity. So they'll say, well, I didn't really want to do that. They didn't want to make a commitment. There was maybe things in their life, but generally speaking, they just didn't want the opportunity. They didn't capitalize on the opportunity. And I knew, for example, being promoted from marketing manager to running marketing for the division of Motorola, that was a huge opportunity. For me, it meant moving to London. That was another opportunity as well. And identified it, and I didn't hesitate to say no. I said yes right away. I'll take it. I was the first pick for that role, but the general manager had a second pick that was already in London.
Yeah, sure.
So he said, if you don't want the role, that's fine. I understand, Gabriel, but and we have somebody else. But if you want it, you're my first pick. So when there are opportunities like that, and it's right for you as a person and so on, then you need to capitalize on those quickly and not hesitate.
All right, Gabriel, thank you so much.
No problem.